call the Honourable Paul Goldsmith.
Well, that was a very interesting speech, as if there is anybody in this House who thinks cartel behaviour is a good thing and something that the public is in favour of. Everybody is opposed to cartel behaviour, and that is why in this country there have been very strict and severe civil sanctions against cartel behaviour, running to fines of up to $10 million and huge sums involved. And so it has always been treated as a very, very serious offence. Well, what we've seen here today is a very unedifying spectacle of a new government filibustering away over its own bills, dragging things out because it has no agenda. And so what we've seen is the government sort of sat down and realised, oh my goodness, we've got all these weeks of sitting time and we have no bills. And all the new ministers were sent off on a little errand to find what are effectively a bit like members' bills, to find some bill which is easy to draw up, which flicks a little switch that they can introduce into the House so that they can look like they are government, they have any idea about what they're doing. And so here we have this bill brought into the House, which overturns a decision that was made by this House only last year after long and due consideration. Now, yes, you can argue, intelligent people can argue about whether it's a good thing to criminalise cartel behaviour or not. There are some countries that do, and there are some countries that don't. It's not. There are perfectly legitimate arguments on both sides. On balance, as Minister in the previous government, I was opposed to the criminalisation for the simple reason that up till now we have seen this as a civil matter with very severe penalties involved. But ultimately, if government does every year pass a new way for directors of companies to go to jail, come up with a new way for them to go to jail if their judgments are wrong, then ultimately it does add up and have a chilling effect, as the phrase has been used, an effect on innovation, because we want our directors to be cautious, but if you push them to be ultra-cautious, then there is a cost in terms of innovation. And the opposition members may make out it's the simplest thing in the world to detect cartel behaviour or to understand cartel behaviour, but the boundary between pro-collaborative, pro-competition collaboration and anti-competition collaboration is not as clear-cut as you would think, and what may be pro-collaborative one year might turn out to be anti-competitive the next year. And so this is an area which, in many countries on the world, there is detailed and a long drawn-out public process about how best to handle it. And we, on balance, were strongly of the view that the regime that we've had in place in New Zealand for many, many years, in a small economy with small businesses on the average dominating, was the appropriate one for New Zealand. And there's been no robust evidence put forward by officials or before the committee which makes a strong case for changing what has been in place. And if you have the view that regulatory restraint is a good political philosophy to hold, then this is the approach that you should take. So this government's introducing this one, and we'll look forward to taking it to Select Committee and hearing what people have to say. But let's not forget what this is all about, which is filling up the order paper in order to avoid embarrassment on the part of a new government which doesn't have a clear program to put forward.